We could. Yep. Oh yay! Oh yay! Oh yay! All rise for the Honorable Zach Hirsch, ladies and gentlemen. He prepares to use his judicious mind to advise us all on errors and omissions policies. Welcome again to our 9th episode of COLLABCAST. Yeah, that's right. I got a fan of one, Nick Ayers. As always, I'm Adam Serwinski, joined by Nick Ayers, the missing member of the O-Town Boys. You may not have seen them, but he definitely had some. What was that song they called? It was like "Sweet Dreams," or I forget. "Liquid Dreams." That's what it was. It was definitely a big time hit.
We're already starting off on a bad note.
It's never a bad note if it's O-Town, folks. So we're back here on Google Hangouts tonight. In the Facebook page, we want you guys to collaborate with us, ask questions, ask Zach, try and stump him. He's our
please.
guru. That's right. Bring the heat to Zach. So do it on our Facebook page. Ask the questions there, and then we can go ahead and pass them along. But in the meantime, like I said, tonight's podcast is focusing on E&O coverage. Finding out first how kind of it applies to us, what things we should be concerned about, which some things we should be thinking about in purchasing our own E&O, and then turning it a little bit to see if we can find new streams of revenue for you and your insurance agency on how to buy and sell, or how to sell that insurance policy, and also in some ways protect your agency a little bit more by offering up that E&O policy. So welcome, Zach, to the podcast. Fantastic that you could join us tonight. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your agency just to get us kicked off?
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys. Good to be here. So I got started in this over a decade ago. I come from a legal background. I was born and raised in Houston, and I started when I was in law school. My dad was a longtime insurance defense lawyer, and I'd always been around insurance all my life. And he had obviously handled professional liability claims, so it kind of came as a natural fit for me. I always say that I wasn't the best law school student, but I did have the best grade in insurance law. So one thing I do know is insurance. And when I left law school, I got an opportunity with a guy that was head of Willis professional liability, lawyers professional liability. And we started selling professional liability insurance to lawyers. And about 3 years later, I left and started my own agency. And here I am now, about in my 8th year. And my focus is on professional liability in those lines. So errors and omissions for just about any profession, from lawyers to insurance agents to real estate, anybody but the medical field. So I'm good. I'm a good resource for anyone looking for professional lines, whether it's management liability and D&O to professional liability. In any of those type of areas and aspects. I come kind of from a technical background, so I've done some expert witnessing on the matters and on reasonable standard of care for agent brokers, and I really know the technical aspects of professional liability very well.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about how and why you've kind of decided to focus your practice on E&O.
Good question to start. So, when I was in law school, I really kind of gained a love for insurance. And as I grew as a professional, I really decided that when I started in insurance, I wanted to be specific to what I knew best. I've always believed in the motto that you don't know everything, but you know what you know. And I know insurance, and I knew claims, and I'd worked in an insurance defense firm, so I'd always been around malpractice insurance and everything that went into that. So it came to my mind that why be the jack of all trades when you can just be good at one thing. And I really enjoyed the crossover of how professional liability and insurance kind of blur the lines on the law, because a lot of what professional liability deals with at the end of the day is legal aspects and things of that nature. So for me, it was a natural fit, and it's something that, I've really, honed my craft. I go and I speak on these things, and I research and I keep up with case law, and I look for trends in professional liability, what's happening, and, what claims are rising on a regular basis. So I really just educate myself, and, I like to think that I'm a valuable resource in an area for professional liability for professionals of all types.
So I got a quick question for you, just
Sure.
right off the bat, just to kind of, bring some
Give me a
context
layup,
here.
Nick.
Give you a no. This no.
Hey.
So, no. Let's be honest. Anything I give you is going to be a layup. I
No,
don't focus on professional lines. So anything I give you is going to sound like my 4-year-old that's asking the question. But I do have a question for you, just
Sure.
as it turns this, because I think a lot of agents don't. I think the hot button for agents is let's focus on personal lines, let's focus on commercial lines, or let's focus on life. Like you don't run into a lot of people who are like, yeah, man, professional lines is my gig, that's my jam, right? So when you just as people are asking questions or situations are coming up in the group, how often do you read what other agents, professionals in the insurance space, you read what they say and you're like, ooh, that's not good. Like, be it in our group or anywhere else. Like, how often do you see people just in our group, in our community, and they'll give like advice to another agent, and you're like, don't do that.
This question is loaded, man. This thing is loaded because
far from a layup.
Yeah, because this is a good one to start with. Because here's what I'll say, as we kind of talked off air. I'm always lurking on the IAOA Facebook page. So don't think I'm never not lurking and paying attention. So I see things said, on there regarding professional liability. And I'm always kind of, my mind it's hard to wrap your mind when you see things like that, because I look at it from a very technical standpoint. So when I see things kind of thrown against the wall, I want to just, scream, basically. I want to say, oh my God, this is not the way you should do it. So I'm always, looking to help people, educate people. But yeah, it's tough. I always get, people always come to me, whether it's lawyer clients or even other wholesalers and brokers and people that are coming to me that, want to, get business from my agency. They say, I've never seen someone that just specializes in professional liability. Who does that? And, me. And maybe that's a good thing and maybe that's a bad thing. But, I've really just, hunkered down and focused. And I really think I have something to offer in this particular field. Like I said, I know nothing about, half of what you know, Nick, about any other coverage. That's not me, but, this field and educating and helping people is where, I make my mark, and it's where I fit in best.
Nice.
You talked earlier about watching trends. What trends in the independent agency or in agency insurance agent E&O are you seeing upticks in, just as far as trends? I'm not telling you how to fix them or what agencies to be do to replace them, but what things are you seeing as being in the case law and things that you're tracking as being things that agents need to be concerned about? That's
a good question. There are so many ways to direct this. You're still seeing the old-fashioned claims. And when I say old-fashioned, is you promised me something that I didn't get. Or something that I had wanted covered wasn't covered under the policy you sold me. So, what we see is a myriad of, as you can imagine, what a client's expectation is versus, what the broker is offering. So, Nick, as we kind of spoke off air, it's a difficult realm to always figure out what the client's expectation is. So the goal is to, you do the best you can to lay out everything that, you're providing insurance for. But at the same time, the communication aspect, I think, is lost on a lot of agents' minds. Look, this isn't a race to sell insurance. Okay. So if you're selling insurance and you're worried about, premium and things like that, it's not a race. You need to be talking to the client and figuring out what it is they need and how the best way to cover it is. If the expectations of the, agent and the insured are, better laid out up front, you're going to have a much better chance of, stopping or mitigating any type of matter or claim that would come later on. And I think that's what gets lost in a lot of selling that I see with agents is, and this goes for any type of insurance, is that clients are, you're not communicating with your insureds, and you're in a hurry to get them best premium, get them best this, where you're losing the communication. So to circle back, Adam, I don't think the insurance agents field is much different than what I see in terms of lawyers' claims, because you see a lot of the standard claims in E&O for insurance agents, which is I thought you were providing this, or I thought I purchased this, but I'm not covered for it. So I think that's unfortunately, still a lot of what we're seeing. And I guess my big thing is a lot of what I see in doing some of the expert witnessing is a lack of communication. And that, you can put so many things in writing, but if you're not communicating with the clients up front, then, that's where the difficulty lay later on.
That kind of ties into a little bit about Sean Mooney has a question on the YouTube channel. By the way, if you guys have questions, make sure you post them on the post within IAOA. That way we can see them. It keeps the post at the top here. But Sean has a question. He wants to know, what are the 3 most common claims that you see insurance agents facing? And can you offer some good ways for them or us to protect ourselves?
Good question. Again, I think this relates to I'd have a hard time breaking down the 3 most common. I think in a general sense, the most common claim is going to be simply an insured believing that they were covered for something that they're not covered for. So in a sense, it's, for me, I see that as a lack of communication. And, again, the agent can put only so much in writing. You can only disclaim, if you will, so much in writing. So I think the bottom line in that sense is you need to have expectations up front with the client. It needs to be understood. The risks need to be talked about. You need to learn what they're doing and go, the extra mile. Because as we mentioned off air, unfortunately, this stuff, when it comes to, an E&O claim, it becomes he said, she said. So, you really want to be able to focus on communication. I can't understate. I know everyone thinks that's an easy thing, but, learning about your prospect or your insured and their business is important. It's not, it's almost as important as making the sale, because if you are in a hurry to make that sale and you are not focusing on the bigger picture and doing whatever your checklist is, whatever your agency checklist is, if you have everything from, laying out in advance, what's being purchased, and then coming back behind and saying, okay, check off the boxes of what what you're not going to be purchasing. You can do all that all day, but, that doesn't preclude someone from at the end of the day saying, well, I didn't realize that, this is what I was checking off. And so I think, it's hard to answer, what are 3, general claims, because at the end of the day, a claim basically comes down to what an agent would do, what a reasonable agent would do in that particular situation. So what a prudent, reasonable agent would do. So that's kind of the standard of care for an E&O claim. So if you're thinking in those terms, then you need to be thinking of, what am I doing or what am I not doing to make sure that I am, on the same page with that client, and, getting them exactly what they need, and, having an open relationship. Because what happens is, if you don't, and the client, if you're selling too quickly and not developing that relationship, that's when you miss things, or that's when the client misses something. So I can't, overstate how important it is to communicate, lay out on the line, from the very beginning, what you're purchasing, and, how you're going about it, and learning about their business. So I hope that somewhat answers the question. If it doesn't, shoot me and ask again.
Well, you're over the internet. They can't shoot you unless they're next door.
Exactly.
So I have a question for you. Just using Muniz Rule of 3, which I think was a great rule to have. So as the Muniz Rule of 3, we'll use it as the Muniz Rule of 3. If you were to buy, as an agency owner who buys an insurance policy, what are the top three things, and if you have more, you can add on, but top three things you would make sure you knew before you sign the line on any policy, or that you would want to evaluate before purchasing an E&O policy?
Okay, so you're putting me in the insured shoes, and I'm buying.
Well, you own an agency, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, you bought an E&O policy, probably for yourself. But what are the boxes you're checking as an agency owner that you want to make sure you know before you say this is the right value for me to buy to protect my business?
And this is where I'm going to segue into a little bit of what I want to touch on in this. So where professional liability stands right now, we're in a soft market. So when you're in a soft market and you're looking to purchase any type of insurance, but particularly professional liability, the buyer is in an advantageous position here, because I can go now specifically and look in an E&O policy and decide, how I get more coverage. So with it being in a soft market, I would look at several things. I mean, number one, and I can't understate this enough. If you're buying E&O insurance as an insurance agency owner, talk to your colleagues. Talk to any resource, any other agent that you can talk to about the particular carrier and how they handle claims. So we have a great forum, in our group, we have a great forum where we can talk about those things. So number one, Adam, is figure out whether the carrier has a good reputation for handling claims, how they handle claims. So I see a lot of people, we're going to obviously get into this, but
you mean it should just be on price?
Exactly. Absolute court. Just stop. Nick, the free policy is the best policy.
How much do they charge? How much do they charge? That's what it all comes down to, right? We don't sell on price, but we buy it on price.
So I can't stress enough how that, you want to know that this carrier, when the hits the fan, is going to defend you regardless of, what happened. And not only that they're going to offer coverage, and they're going to look into the claim properly. So I think the number one thing is you need to be talking to people and figuring out if that carrier is a good fit for your, protecting your agency. Because if somebody says to you, I had a terrible experience with them, they denied coverage, they upped my rates immediately after I just sent an incident, then, that's probably not the best carrier for you. And I guess what I'm saying is you're in a soft market, so you can shop your coverage and find the right carrier fit here. So,
but can I throw a
Sure.
wrench in just in that just a little bit, just because for the sake of conversation here. I mean, we kind of joked about it in the beginning. What people are, even in our group, people who are professionals say about E&O coverage, to your own kind of admission, is kind of like, ooh, maybe not so much the best thing. So how much, when you say rely on our colleagues, how much of that is really like a good thing, considering that probably a fair amount of our colleagues probably still don't really know what they're talking about?
I think that's a fair question and a good point. I think what I would say to that is rely on colleagues that have experience in the field. So if someone like me would be a great resource, and you can always tap me and say, Zach, what do you think of this carrier? Do you know anything about them? I think the other answer to that is, I don't think just anybody's word of mouth, Nick, is good on that. I would tend to say that you need to go in and see if someone has handled the claim. So it can't be just, well, I have this carrier, their price is great, their form is great. Well, that's good, but have they handled an incident, a circumstance, or a potential claim for you? How did they handle that? Did they have an adjuster come out? And did he visit with you? And did you talk about the matter? Are there things like pre-claims assistance where you can call? And most reputable carriers now have pre-claims assistance, which is basically a hotline of a professional liability defense law firm that is on staff that is handling the E&O claims. And you can call them up and usually can talk to them for 3 hours and you can say, hey, this is Nick Ayers. I have an issue that I'm concerned about. I don't know whether I need to report this or not, whether I should report this. And they'll have a professional liability defense lawyer, someone that is specializes in handling these claims talk to you and visit with you about the matter free of charge. I know my agency, E&O, has that, and I know most reputable carriers do. So there are things that you can do, in this modern day to figure out, what carriers are reputable and who's handling claims properly. I just think that agents need to make that effort and realize that professional liability insurance is technical. It is technical. It does have its differences because it's on a claims-made form and it's a little bit more specific in how you go about reporting claims. But at the end of the day, you can make a determination if you use the resources. And certainly IAOA, I think we have those resources, and hopefully I'm here to kind of educate on that.
Hopefully, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, heed my warning or don't. That's kind of what I say.
So we talked about knowing about the claims history. Are there any other parts of a policy or component parts of the policy that you say would be very important to you as an agency owner? So some people say claims expenses outside of limits. Some people say a hammer clause is a big deal for them to have or to be able to negotiate on. Some people would say, like you talked about the pre-claim kind of assistance that's out there.
Big one.
Right. So you'd probably put the pre-claim assistance over there. But for people who maybe aren't so familiar, maybe give them insight into what the hammer clause is about and how negotiable they are on that type of thing. And also inside or outside of the claim, inside or outside of the limit as far as claims expense and what those things kind of do.
This is a good question, and this could take up the rest of the broadcast. So
keep it short, man. We got a lot of those things to talk about.
Nick, if anytime you're falling asleep, just tap the microphone or something. So exactly. So this is where you get into the technical aspects of a professional liability policy on a claims-made form. A hammer clause basically says that when a carrier is representing you and they are in the process of trying to settle your claim, and at some point they have negotiated a settlement and they come to you, they obviously have to come to you to sign off on that settlement or whatever it may be, the settlement or agreement, or in trial, they feel like they've gotten to a point where they can settle this case. And you say to them, no, I don't want to settle. I don't like that settlement. I want to go forward and try this case to a verdict with a jury. Well, that's fine. And you can do that. But the clause in the policy, which will hammer down on you, says that if they lose, and basically if they lose at trial because you sent it to trial and that settlement was better than what the verdict turned out to be, they're only on the hook for what that settlement would have been at the time you could have settled, but you said no. So if you go to trial, you're on the hook for the rest. And there are soft hammer clauses where maybe they'll reduce that by 50%. Maybe they'll say the jury verdict, we're going to do 50% because you didn't agree to the settlement. So that hammer clause is in there, and there's a reason it's called a hammer clause. So a lot of people don't know that. So, the one thing I say is with the modern day, with as good as these professional liability lawyers are, if they bring you a settlement in a case, you probably want to follow their advice. They probably have your best interest in heart. So there's things like that you want to look at. I can really drill down. I mean, there are things. We don't want to get
too specific. Just in a general sense, right? And then just really quickly, since I brought it up, just wrap up if you can, what that outside of limits kind of means, or inside of limits on the policy, because that's certainly different than the occurrence forms that we're seeing and mostly dealing with.
So you have two things. You have claims expenses in addition to the limits or outside the limits, and you have claims expenses within the limits, inside the limits. So what that simply means is that when your policy is in effect and there is some sort of defense costs or an indemnity payment paid out, those defense costs, if you have a policy within the limits, which is standard, within the limits, means that those defense costs erode your limits of liability. So if you have a per claim limit of $1 million, let's say you get $500,000 in defense cost alone, then you only have $500,000 left for an indemnity payment. Whereas if you have defense cost outside the limits, it will not erode your limits of liability. It basically is a separate, look at it as a separate limit, almost like a sublimit. And it takes that and it covers those regardless of how high those go. And it doesn't erode your $1 million per claim in indemnity payments.
So here's a dumb question then, just in that regard. I mean, whether we are purchasing it for ourselves or trying to advise a client on this, why would we ever select option A? What would be the reason for selecting option A? That just sounds like a horrible idea.
Well, so the option A is that, I don't buy myself. I would never buy a professional liability policy where the defense costs erode the limits. But
Amen.
remember, it's most carriers, and I say most, I'm going to say 99.9% of carriers are going to charge you an additional premium for that particular addition to your policy. Now, Nick, it's not very expensive, maybe $300-$400 on some. But
so is it purely the uneducated who get that first option? Absolutely.
And unfortunately, what you have is you have, and it's a great question or statement. What you have is you have people that are selling professional liability to insurance agents that aren't explaining that. And that would be an easy way for a professional like me to make an additional amount of premium and selling you a much better policy. And it's cheap. It's cheap. It's nothing. I mean, people are always saying, well, if I move the deductible, up $5,000, can I save this amount of money? No. I mean, we know that moving a deductible in a professional liability policy does not change the premium very much. But this will change the premium slightly and give you a significant amount of more coverage. And one other thing I want to point out is there are features, things like first dollar defense. And I know you know of that, Adam.
I just get excited talking about nerdy things that are insurance.
Yeah, so well, that's why I'm here, man. I'm here on my Wednesday night. Yeah, I mean, I'm geeking out over. I love this. And so, things like first dollar defense are, if you buy a first dollar defense policy, what it says is they being the carrier, will pay all your defense costs, and you do not have to submit your deductible until you pay an indemnity payment. So if the only thing that happens in the case is they settle it without you paying anything out other than defense costs, then your policy doesn't get touched. You never had to drop in your deductible, and that's it. So with a first dollar defense, you only pay your deductible if you pay out an indemnity payment. Something. So
you're only paying if they find you at fault or they try and settle it on you, right? Like that's it. So you're not paying for that claim that's made that's nuisance or annoying. You're not writing that check for the first $1,000 or $5,000 or whatever dollars of legal fees.
And Nick, you have this face like, why the hell do I not have that on my policy right now? I mean,
no, so, I'm actually trying to. I'm looking at see if people have comments or questions or whatever. I have like 5 different things on my screen.
Okay,
here.
Gotcha. I didn't want that to be your face, so I was just checking.
Well, and the reason I think the reason I wanted to bring up those features is when you talk about a soft market, these are the things that you can negotiate onto the policy to get onto that more robust form.
Yes.
And I think what you brought up was important just a moment ago, and maybe it'll bring out some more topics and some more conversation, is that you talked about it from a selling perspective. So let's talk a little bit about how this industry can be another, and I think a really good source of income for anyone running small business and things like that. Talk a little bit about, if you would, areas or arenas in which you sell E&O policies so that our members can know, hey, I should be adding this on for a nice chunk of change.
So, I mean, there are a lot of things that you can add on that make differences. Another one in this kind of little realm that we're talking about is, have an aggregate deductible. See if you can sell an aggregate deductible, meaning that, there's per claim deductibles and there's aggregate deductibles. So there are lots of E&O policies, and not all, but a lot of carriers will, under the right circumstances, if, they get the application and the risk is right, they will offer I use law firms a lot because obviously I sell to a lot of law firms. So bigger law firms, I can approach them and say, hey, I've gone to the carrier and I've negotiated a aggregate deductible. So no matter how many claims you have in a year, you're paying your deductible one time versus a per claim deductible, which could be, some of these law firms carry $25,000 and $50,000 deductibles. So that makes a difference to them. And they look at me and they say, whoa, my agent never told me that. And so, that's one thing you can sell. The other thing that's, this makes a huge difference. If you drill down in damages, in the damages portion of an errors and omissions policy, there are E&O policies that exclude punitive and exemplary damages. And Adam, there are E&O policies that include it, meaning they do not exclude it via the very language of the policy. That is a huge difference. If for whatever reason your agency was found to be not only negligent, but grossly negligent, well, if your policy says we're not covering punitive damages, you could be on the hook for those in addition, and the coverage isn't going to provide for that. So I always find, I always try to bring my law firm clients, policies that have punitives and exemplaries covered within the damages clause. And that's a huge distinction.
So and maybe to give some insight from both our backgrounds, punitives essentially shows like if you were grossly negligent. So someone in your agency is acting irregularly or doing something repeatedly or really out there, like pocketing endorsement money that they supposedly sell. That could be seen as beyond a normal negligence claim, and you could be on the hook for exemplary damages where they're just trying to punish you in order to teach other agents how not to do business. Is that fair? I mean,
100%. Absolutely.
It's the off with his head type of damage, right? Just off with his head.
Absolutely. It's to punish the actor. So if it's clearly something you've done that falls under either grossly negligent and or dare I say brazen to an extent. If it's something you've completely just dropped the ball and it looks almost, I don't want to say intentional, but bordering, then yes, a jury could come back and say, look, not only have we found you liable for these compensatory damages, we've also found in addition punitive damages. And if that happens, you're going to be in real trouble because that's where the damages can treble damages, as we call them in the legal field.
Sean Mooney has a question for us. He's wanting to know if you can further illustrate a little bit more the difference between soft hammers and hard hammers, and kind of illustrate that difference a little bit better.
Sure. So as I said earlier, Sean, the difference being that if a full hammer clause is basically saying that if you do not comply, comply maybe not a good word, if you do not agree to your own E&O attorney's settlement, if they come to you and they say, look, we think this is the best case scenario for all parties involved, and if you say no, I, Sean Mooney, do not want to settle this case. I know I was in the right here. I want to take this to trial. If you lose at trial, they are only going to cover they are only responsible per that hammer clause up to what they could have negotiated for at the time, but you wouldn't let them. With the soft hammer clause, that usually involves a lessening of that blow, meaning that they may only they may drop the damages 50%, meaning they may go on with that remaining portion that they could have settled it for at the time versus what a jury verdict was. They'll split that with you 50-50. That's kind of what a soft hammer is. So it's a lessening of the hammer clause. Usually soft hammers are about 50%. The language can be different in every one of them, but it's basically them kind of throwing an olive branch and saying, all right, even though you didn't take our advice, we're still going to come in and split the difference with you. But, be careful there because the hammer clause language is in there. So whether it's a soft or a full on hard hammer, that language can be very, damaging to you
So just
Hope
maybe
that makes sense.
to use numbers, it would be like, so if let's say they say, hey, we'll sell this for 300,000, and you say,
Okay.
no way, I didn't do anything wrong, and the jury comes back at 500,000 on a hard hammer, that 200,000 is your responsibility.
Exactly.
And if
Absolutely.
and if a soft hammer was to say, hey, you're responsible for 50% of any excess verdict, right? Because they're asking, Sean actually followed up with language saying the language of the contract said something to the extent of, the insured is responsible for 50% of any excess verdict. You would have to pay 100,000 of that 200,000, where they'd be on using that same $500,000 difference. You'd be on the hook for $100,000, which, I mean, that's huge, right? I mean, that in and of itself could be a business breaker, right? That could be the end of it.
And Sean's asking about language. Sean, I'm going to see if I can pull up and think of how the language is styled. It's in there. You can't miss it. Let me think off the top of my head how that would be styled so you can know the difference. It'll say, the one thing you'll know, Sean, is it will say in there a percentage. It may not say, obviously it's a soft, but it'll say we will go up to 50% of what should have been the verdict or something. Let me pull it up and see how some of these are worded. Give me one second.
Beyond nerdy.
Come on. We're here. What else are we gonna do? It's a good. Sean's got a good question I want to answer. Let me see what my favorite policy says. Sure.
While you're digging in, Mike Esperanza mentioned that his comment kind of was, do you see carriers showing a willingness to offer their defense costs out or claims expenses outside of limits merely based on claims experience, or is it something that, if someone has got a clean record, they'll just give it to them outright, or is it something you should have to ask for regardless of your claims history?
So that's a good question, Adam. So the answer to that question is they're never just usually going to offer it outright. That is something that a good agent is going to both ask the underwriter and is going to offer to you once they've spoken with the underwriter. Because most of the time, claims expenses outside the limits is not something they're excited to give away because for a lot of reasons, a lot of times I don't want to say a lot of times, most times, Adam, it's on a case-by-case basis. They're going to look at that application, they're going to look at that agency, they're going to look at that law firm, and they are going to decide if this is a safe risk to offer CEOL, claims expenses outside the limits. And so it really comes down to two things in my mind: having a good carrier and a good underwriter, and having an agent that knows what that is and can bring you that option. Because believe it or not, when I bring clients, law firm clients, that option, they're shocked. They're like, really, we can do that? And then, they want the option. And if it's $400, $500, $600 difference, you know as well as I do what a difference having a sublimit basically of defense costs, because I know how insurance defense lawyers bill, and they can bill all day. That's what they do.
It's $400 or $500 is in most cases not even 1 hour of attorney time. So if you think about paying for 1 hour of attorney time in order to get all of the attorney time away from your limits, and your limits actually doing what you want, what you intended to do, it's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. I mean, it's that along with, like I said, the deductible. Those are things that you can sell, and a lot of believe it or not, and I don't know if I'm seeing it as much with the insurance agents, but I know I'm seeing it with the law firms and some of the others. A lot of these carriers now are doing kind of what I'm calling hybrid policies. And they're kind of giving you sublimits now, and they're trying to, whether they're asking for an additional premium or throwing some of it in the policy, we're seeing the cyber coverage. So the cyber coverage is now being offered on some of the lawyers' professional liability policies. The underwriters is coming to me and saying, Zach, we've added a limit of, cyber coverage. Maybe it's $10,000 or $25,000. And sometimes it's for purchase for an additional premium, and sometimes it's just added in like it would be for a disciplinary coverage or any other type of supplementary coverage that some of these, we call them bells and whistles, but some of these other coverages that are involved in E&O.
So I tried to ask this question earlier, but I in true to form, probably did it poorly. Can you tell us a little bit about industries? What industries, if you're selling E&O policies, what industries do you need them, right? Like, what industries would you make sure, if I'm talking to somebody selling them a BOP or I'm selling them a commercial auto, where should I also in that proposal include E&O coverage?
That's a great question. And what I would say is any business that is offering a service to a third party for a fee should be considering professional liability insurance. If you are selling services to a third party for a fee, you should be offering professional liability. And that goes for, like we talked about it off air, there are about 5 or 6 staple. There's doctors, lawyers, CPAs, real estate, insurance agents, and about 1 or 2 others that have their own forms. You know them. You know those businesses need them. But there are so many other businesses that can be written on a miscellaneous E&O form that need professional liability coverage. So I think if, you've got a business where, they're offering some sort of service and they're getting a fee for it, if the service is, whatever it is, it's probably a consulting service. So business consultants, they need professional liability. People
Let me fire up some industries. Let me fire up industries. You tell me if it fits or not. Contractors, like plumbing or electricians. So, does that make sense?
So I would say on that, there's a lot of discussion about that right now. I've read a lot of different things about general contractors needing professional liability insurance. I would say yes. But not, maybe right? Maybe that's just me.
You sound like an insurance salesman right now.
I know. This is terrible. See, this is not, Nick, this is not where I wanted to go with this. But
what do you mean? This is how we're going to make money. Absolutely. And how we're going to cover our agencies. Why not go there?
Exactly. So I would say absolutely yes. Okay. There will be people that'll tell you, what the hell does, what risk is a, general contractor got? Well, they're providing a service and it's for a fee. So that would be one I would say yes to. What else?
Housing associations. Housing associations.
I'm going to say on housing associations, I'm dealing with one now.
Well, D&O is a form of errors and omissions, right? Directors and officers.
Yeah, D&O is what they need. Especially I'm assuming that the housing, association is going to be set up as a nonprofit. So that's going to be where your directors and officers coverage is going to provide that shield, for those, for those on the board that are making decisions. I don't think you necessarily need professional liability there.
Dog groomers.
Ooh, I would say yes.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's not just a lawyer, doctor, dentist.
No,
right?
And that's the biggest misconception about this. That I don't want to give Hiscox, a plug here, but I'm going to give Hiscox a plug because if you go onto Hiscox and see, what their subcategories is that they sell to on professional liability insurance, they do a very good job of giving you a long list of services that they provide professional liability for. And if you just hit the drop down box, you'd probably be surprised and say, wow, I have that business, but they don't have professional liability. And so I think, something like that, when I write a policy with Hiscox here, I write a lot of consultants with Hiscox because they've got a good form for business consultants. And, they've got a good form. And every time I go on there, I'm always like, man, I was like, this is a long list. And they've got, they don't even have it all encompassed, but they've got a good list.
How about wedding videographers?
I would say yes. Someone could interpret something wrong with a wedding video and said, you weren't professional. You didn't do this the way we wanted this done. Yes. I mean, for me, I could see it.
I got two questions for you. I got two questions for you. So they're kind of parallel. Like we hear these kinds of questions all the time when it comes to other lines of coverage, whether it be personal or commercial, right? So you want to learn about commercial lines, you go sometimes either you go to like the Hartford school, commercial line school, or you go to this training or you go to that training. Somebody is listening to this or they're watching this and they're saying, man, I think this kind of appeals to me. The technical side of this that he's talking about, I kind of like it. I'm not really offering it, but you know what? I'm kind of a novice. I really don't know where to start. Where should somebody be going to kind of enhance their education, get certified, whether it's the initials by their name or just get a real basic firm grasp of professional liability?
That's a perfect question.
That's a first part question, but go ahead.
The largest, and I go to the national conference every year, the largest group of professional liability professionals in general, whether it's claims adjusters, claims, people, underwriters, professional liability defense lawyers, people like me, retail agents. The largest group of that is called the PLUS Group. It's the Professional Liability Underwriters Society. They are a national group. They have their conference coming up in November in San Diego. It is probably 1,000 people strong. It is a large convention. I do a lot of work with the Plus chapter here locally in Houston.
Not as cool as innovation, I'm sure.
Definitely not.
I'm repping the gear tonight, by the way.
It's a bunch of stiffs like me talking about this.
Sounds like fun.
This and that. Yeah, it's a blast.
Nick's buying his ticket as he's sitting here.
But if you want to get into that, they've got a certification to answer your other part of that question. They've got a certification, which I am actually doing right now. It is called the ArePLU designation, the Registered Professional Liability Underwriter designation. And you go through a long process of completing these modules. And then after modules are done, you have to go and take a test. And once you've taken about, 11 or 12 tests, you get this certification. But it is all about professional liability. You can pick and choose some of these.
And that's good for things like continuing education to stay on top of things?
Yes. It's excellent. You go in and you can pick out some of these modules and what you want to learn. You can, pick out the lawyers and the doctors. And so they've got, different credits and things like that. But you go and, you go through and it's a long process. I've been doing it, it's self-study. And you buy the books and you go and take the test. And at the end of the day, you get the designation once you've done all that. But it gives you a phenomenal background in professional liability insurance. It's tailored for and dedicated to.
Sounds like a great thing to know about for cocktail parties and the like.
Yeah.
I'm just looking. I pulled it up. I'm looking at the list. I'll make sure to put it up in the group so you guys can all get to it and see the list of topics. But certainly super interesting. I mean, if you're nerdy like me, this is kind of a cool thing. But I wouldn't tell your friends.
Yeah, it makes you fun at parties. I have a second
question, Nick.
Second question. So again, a question that comes up a lot of times in regards to other lines of insurance. People will say, "What carriers do I need to get appointed with? How do I get connected to these carriers? Is it any different on the personal line side?" And if you feel comfortable or not, it's totally your call. But what carriers should somebody say that they need to look at if they say, you know what, I want to focus on the legal field, or I want to focus on insurance agents? Are there a particular appetite of carriers that they should be looking at, and how do they get appointed?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Okay, we can bypass it altogether. I mean,
No, absolutely. When I say tough, I mean every industry specific, whether it's lawyers or CPAs or real estate. There's sometimes not a lot of crossover. So what Hiscox may write for business consultants, they're not going to write for law firms.
Sure.
And so there are a lot of specific carriers that write specific, industries. And then on top of that, Nick, they'll have an MGA, a separate managing general agent, come and run their program. So you can have, for instance, let's say Let's take Aon as an example. Aon runs the access program for small lawyers. So from like 1 to 25, Aon distributes their product. Okay. So in professional liability, what you find is you have a lot of that. You have what are called programs. And the programs are generally run by these carriers that go out and hire and find deals with these larger MGAs, whether it's Aon or you've got Founders Professional, which is a big group. They now have their own program for lawyers, for small law firms. They created an admitted carrier, so they've got a program. So depending on where you are, what industry you are, it's a wide ranging of carriers. So if you come to me, Nick, and say, Zach, I want to get into lawyers, well, then I'm going to point you in the right direction. But it's difficult to just narrow it down, because there really is no jack of all trades carrier. There isn't one carrier writing lawyers, doctors, real estate agents, CPAs, insurance agents. It really comes down to the industry specific, and then those carrier players, and then who is administering those products. And then on the second part of that, getting admitted or getting appointed can be a different process, because sometimes they'll have what's called an open brokerage, as where they say, we'll send you the agreement, you sign it, and your agency's appointed. And there are other ones that are much more difficult that want, they want to see what type of, I've got ones that want to see, how much, premium I've got in that particular industry. And they want to know, they want to see a resume. And I've had almost, it felt like an interview to get the appointment. And so professional liability is no different in that aspect, that it runs the gamut on that.
So I want to circle back just a little bit, and I'm going to ask a Nick Ayers style question, which is basically my opinion Adam, based, and then allow you to agree or disagree. I love these. That is Nick's way. Nick gives thoughts, and then you agree or disagree. You're not obligated to agree at any point. But Sean and Mike had this conversation going on in the post, and I just want to get to it, because I want to reward people who are kind of investing. And Sean brings up a good point. And it goes along with what you're talking about. He says, should we not bother trying to quote folks that have professional coverage through an association? Like, for instance, Dog Groomers of America. Are their prices generally unbeatable? And Mike kind of followed up and says, yeah, those groups are unbeatable. But my kind of opinion on this is, like, who cares if they're unbeatable? A, the person may not know about the group. And B, for your own E&O coverage, if you don't offer it, they can claim they didn't know about it and that you should have told them, whether or not you send them to the association or write it yourself. So would you agree with that, or would you just say, hey, look, the associations are too big, don't even bother writing it if it's like a dog groomer or if it's a barber or whatever it might be, petition?
I would absolutely agree with you that you should be offering it regardless of the association. A lot of those associations have bare bones professional liability policies that aren't very good, that don't have coverages like we've discussed on this COLLABCAST. And I would absolutely offer and then sell what you have. I mean, look, the bottom line is we're salespeople. So if you're not trying to sell, then in my opinion, you're just missing out on the bottom dollar. You need to be selling. So what that there's an association. Sell why the policy you have, even if it's a couple $100 more, sell why it's better. I mean, that's my opinion. That's the way I do it.
Yeah,
I sell all the time.
It's basically the equivalent of getting life insurance from your work, right? Like, it's just, yes, you have an accident policy from your work, but let's get real life insurance here that protects your family.
Yeah.
So I have a operations question for you. Somebody, people who will watch this and they'll say, we do pretty well with commercial lines, but we don't really attack the professional lines. In your opinion, is the animal big enough to where it's an okay thing for your agent who's focusing already on the GL, the BOP, the property, to go ahead and try to attack that? Or for someone who's really serious about it, should they look to probably bring in somebody whose sole focus is this line of business? Like, for example, in our agency, we want to hire a commercial only producer, right? Whose only focus is commercial. We don't want our personal lines agents to dabble in that stuff. Really, our philosophy is let's have somebody else just run that animal. Would you say, or how would you feel about, agency owners or agents trying to do that dual purpose? Do you think it should just be someone dedicated just to that, just because of the nature of the beast?
Here's what I would say about that. And we touched on this, Nick, when we were off the air. Look, I think the bottom line here is professional liability insurance, errors and omissions insurance is, to me, one of the very technical aspects of insurance. This is something that you need to know, and you need to know well. The policies, I always say this to every client that buys professional liability insurance from my agency. No two E&O policies are created equally. If you think that, you're wrong, and you're making a mistake, and something's going to get missed because they're not created legally. Every policy has different language. Every policy, as we've talked about on this COLLABCAST, has different pieces and bits and pieces to it. So the answer is, I believe this is, I don't want to say it is specialized, but I do want to say that I believe that if you are going to have someone in your agency that's going to sell the professional liability side, that they need to take the time to educate themselves and learn about what they're selling. I don't believe anyone can just pick up and sell this, because if you're selling this policy up against someone like me,
you'll lose every time.
Every time, because I'm going to point out, just like we talked about, everything. And what's going to be with Nick, they're going to come and buy the more expensive policy from me. Right. Not only are the premium won't even matter, because I will sit down with them and sell them on why all this stuff's important. Right. So at the end of the day, I know we're all salespeople, and I know that we're pushing premium, things like that, but this is one of those things where the agent on this can make a difference, and you can bring value. And when I say value, you bring the agent can bring the value here.
I look at a lot of policies, and they're not professional lines policies, but I look at a lot of policies, and I talk to a lot of prospects, and a lot of times it's not uncommon for me to look at a policy and go, you know what, you got a pretty good thing going here. You should just, looks like your agent knew what they were doing. You got good underlying limits. You got a good umbrella. Your home, everything from a personal line side looks pretty fair. You're getting a good competitive rate. Unless you really hate the guy or gal, I suggest staying put. Like, that's not an uncommon thing for me to say. I would imagine, though, in your line of work, that never happens, because almost the majority of policies that you see, you probably look at them and you can within 5 seconds look at them and go, "Ooh, that's not good." Is that fair?
No, it's very fair. But what I will say to you is, with the first part of what you said, I agree. If I look at, I will take someone, a prospective insured that's coming to me, that's a buyer, and I will look at their current policy and I will say, sir, there is absolutely, you have excellent coverage now. There's no way I'm going to be able to beat this on premium.
But is that pretty rare?
Where you are.
Is that pretty rare?
Very rare. It's very rare.
It's very common on the personal line side, but it's very rare on the professional line side.
It's rare because they're not getting, I mean, I just renewed an account yesterday with a large law firm, and they had another broker come in and shop it, someone that they had done business with a long time. And we got down to, we drilled down, and the lady looked at me and she said, Zach, I looked back at all our past policies, and not one of our policies ever contained punitive damages as an inclusion into the damages. She said, every one of the options you brought me does carry punitive damages. And she said, when I, talked to the managing partner about it, that made a difference, that I came in and educated them, and they didn't even realize that, because that agent at that agency, and I'm not saying he's a bad agent, he just doesn't know. That person doesn't know. So, what you don't know is what you don't know. And so that's the only caveat I would say to you, Nick, is if you are bringing in someone to your agency to sell professional lines, there are ways they need to be educated, and they can be. This isn't rocket science. It's just, I've taken the time to learn this stuff, and that's all that is. Right. And so it's just a matter of that.
But to that point, Zach, are the premium numbers and the things that you see as far as comparing, you're writing BOPs probably as well, right? You're rounding out these customers, these law firms.
Absolutely.
Is the premium justify that level of investment? Not only from premium from a perspective of hey, the money's pretty good in selling E&O, but also from a perspective of, hey, it's a really good investment as well to protect ourselves in the longevity of our business, to have someone writing this and writing it the right way. So do you see it as being on both sides having value to an agency to kind of sell it, as well as have it done by someone who knows what they're doing just to protect the agency for the long haul?
Oh, I absolutely. I think it brings value. Yeah, like you said, on both ends. I think number one, it's a way to distinguish yourself from another agency by bringing up the professional liability aspect of their, risk, and, speaking with them on it and being able to educate them on it. I think that's absolutely. And then from your own standpoint, as an agency, owner, producer, that, you need to be offering this coverage if it's available, just like you would. I mean, if they're checking off that, we're not purchasing, this, and we're not purchasing that, well, then they need to be checking off that they're not purchasing professional liability if you're offering it. So absolutely, the answer is this needs to be offered. Professional lines, and again, cyber is another one where every person, every business that's that's keeping some sort of documents and records, we as agents need to be offering the cyber coverage. Whether they take it is another matter, but we need to be offering it because it's a huge gap. There's a gap there, and it needs to be addressed. And that's just something that we as agents need to be offering our insureds.
Man, Zach, I think all of us can leave here tonight kind of thinking, going back and yelling at the brokers that we brought our own E&O policies from. Why are they leaving?
I hope not. Well, just at least come and talk to me, and I can guide you at least. I
have an obvious question.
Okay.
Oh, it's so obvious. Here we go.
This is an obvious question. Like, why? I'm gonna try to be very delicate here. But you obviously have a skill and a knowledge point and a skill set in this area. Why are you not writing insurance agents?
I don't write a significant amount of insurance agents. That's something that I've never really done a lot of delving into. There are a lot of good established.
That was my next question. What is your take on some of these outfits? We don't have to name them by name, but we have a lot of outfits that are like brokerages for Do you feel, in your honest opinion, we don't have, again, there's lots of them, so we don't have to single anybody out. Do you feel by and large that they're doing us as agency owners justice and doing a good job, and we're getting the right policies? I mean, what is your general take on these things?
So that's a good question. So when I originally started my agency back in 2010, and I began my process of searching for professional liability, I wasn't sure what was out there. And I think I went to whatever the Big I or whatever that is. Sorry, the Big I or whatever that is. But what I learned quickly was they were just trying to sell me on price. And when I started asking questions about details of the policy, I wasn't getting very good answers.
Sure.
So I can say I have no problem divulging this. I use our endorsed provider, the US E&O brokers, Angela and Jennifer over there, and they're great. We have nerdy discussions about professional liability, and they do a good job.
Good. That's who I use. I wanted to make sure I was in good hands. I was going to have you shop it. I was going to have you shop it. So
yeah. So you're good there. They're good ladies, and they're very knowledgeable. And trust me, I know that because I put them to the fire. So I put them to the test. I did it recently, and I'll do it again every time the renewal comes around, especially when one product goes out and a new one comes aboard, and if I have to switch products, I drill down. But yeah, they're good. I don't do a lot of it. I'm not saying, Nick, I won't in the future. I'm not saying, so don't forget about me. Don't forget about me, soon. But, for now, I really, law firms, CPAs and real estate agents, business consultants, Those are a lot of my fields that I really, I go and try to produce business in those fields. If someone comes to me and says, Zach, I want you to be my, I want our agency, to be done by you, I'm going to find them the right market, no problem. But as far as going out and producing business, I don't chase insurance agents right now.
They're the worst clients, don't you agree?
Oh man, a bunch of them. And Sean, if you're still listening, I do not want to forget this. You asked me about the hammer clause, and I want to read you some language because I pulled it up.
Oh boy.
So in your professional liability policy, there's going to be some language, and there'll be something called settlement in your policy. It'll say, settlement. It'll have something like that, and that subsection. And that's where your hammer clause is. So I want to read you what this is a lawyer's professional liability policy, a Berkeley form, and it says the following: the insurer shall not settle any claim without the named insured's consent if, and this is where your hammer clause comes in, if, however, the named insured shall refuse to consent to any settlement recommended by the insurer, which is acceptable to the claimant, acceptable to the other party, and shall elect to contest the claim or continue any legal, administrative, or arbitration proceedings in connection with such claim, then the insurer's liability for the claim shall not exceed the amount for which the claim could have been settled, including claims expenses incurred up to date of such refusal. And that, my friend, is a hard hammer clause.
Just to bring up, that language also puts them on the hook for the legal expenses and anything else after that settlement. So you're also getting hit for those legal bills.
Excellent point. And so to answer your question, if you see a soft hammer, it'll say something about, up to 50% of the refusal. So there'll be some percentage given in there, and that will be your soft hammer clause. So I hope that helps, Andrew. But in every E&O policy, there'll be some sort of subsection that will talk about settlement, and that's where you find your hammer clause.
All right, I want to ask you one other question, and this is where I think what triggered my want to do this interview with you, or this podcast with you, and I brought it up when I brought it up to Nick, because we saw some posts in there that were really commingling the idea of a general liability versus an E&O policy. And can you give a succinct distinction of when this is GL and this is E&O, and never the two shall pass? Because E&O coverage generally doesn't trigger GL and vice versa. Is that fair? Or am I wrong in that?
No, it's rare when they're going to blur the lines. Professional liability coverage is going to be for something you do in whatever professional services, whatever it is you did, whatever it is your business does in a professional services capacity. The GL is going to deal with, damages to a third party for property or, personal injury. Professional liability is going to deal specifically with the professional service you provide, not the damage to the third party in a, property damage claim or a personal injury claim. So I think that's the distinction. I know it's hard I'm trying to think of a good way to distinguish it.
So anything maybe to deal, so an E&O would probably be triggered by anything to do with advice or sale or any kind of recommendation. Absolutely. And the third party or the GL would be somebody trips in your office and bangs their head. And
100%.
Those two things, just so you can kind of compartmentalize, the agency owners can compartmentalize. Okay, now I understand, because that could come into a big deal as far as notifying the carrier. You notify the wrong carrier, you could lose coverage. You notify your GL for an E&O claim, that you run into problems.
So I've seen that before, Adam. You nailed it. I've crazily enough seen an instance where basically a insured came to their agent and said, we have this claim, and they posted a email, and it had a bunch of pictures of what appeared to be a trucking accident. It had pictures in this, okay? It appeared to be a trucking accident, and it said in the email, all it said to the agent was, how do we proceed? And the agent responded by seeing the agent had both sold them. By the way, the agent had sold them a GL policy, a work comp policy, an umbrella and a professional lines policy and a professional liability policy. So the agent had sold them all this. Well, the agent came back, and I guess thinking because they saw the trucking accident, it thought that it was a GL claim. And so they provided their insured the GL claims information. The insured then goes make a claim on the GL policy, and the GL policy says, no, we don't cover this. This is a professional liability claim. What had happened was they were an engineering company, and they were running, they were doing the surveying and some sort of engineering for this truck that was going. It had like a pole, and they were responsible for making sure the truck basically got to where it needed to go safely. And so what it was really a professional liability claim. And so as some time went on, they wasted so much time realizing that it was a professional liability claim. It got submitted too late, according to the professional liability carrier. And of course, that insured went back and sued their broker, saying that you didn't advise me correctly. You gave me the GL carrier, and by the time you gave me the professional liability carrier, it was too late. The claim should have already been reported. So I have seen stuff like that, and that's what I see. And so I know that's, it sounds amazing, but it happens.
Alrighty, well, we all can sleep well tonight, knowing that we all have better.
I don't know if that was a positive or a negative on this show.
Yeah. I was going to say, if there were horror movies for insurance agents, I think we just found one. We got to come up with a cool name for that.
Can I say one last thing?
No, you can't. No, I'm kidding. Go for it.
One last thing, that a piece of unsolicited, advice. Look, I know we've been having a lot of discussion in the group about when to report a claim and whether the reporting of a claim is going to somehow negatively affect you. And let me just say this. We talked about a soft market. If you are in a soft market for professional liability, it means you can shop your coverage and find the right carrier partner. Well, that matters. That matters. Why? Because at the end of the day, if you are in an instance where you're not sure whether to report the claim or not, your carrier should provide a pre-claims assistance hotline, and B, the ability to report an incident or circumstance or potential claim at no harm to your agency. They should be able to review that claim and determine whether it is a legitimate claim and something that needs to be dealt with without harm to both your deductible and your premium. And if they are harming that based on you submitting a claim that you're not sure of, then you're not with the right carrier. Because the bottom line here is mitigation. The more knowledge and the more time that a carrier has to investigate a claim and handle it on your behalf, that helps them. It helps them mitigate the risk at the back end when they may have to come in with a lawyer and handle this. So you should not feel like you're going to be punished or feel scared to report a claim because of what it might do to your deductible or to your premium. And if you are, then it is time to change carriers. So what I would say was, you need to be using your resources with these policies to determine that. The bottom line is, do not adjust your own professional liability claim. That's why there's professionals in this field that do that. Do not determine on your own that you do or you don't have coverage, because at the end of the day, if you do, you're only going to cause yourself heartache when that carrier writes you that coverage opinion and said, had you come to us at the beginning and reported this properly, this would have been covered. But now it is not. And, I don't want anyone to run into that. There is no reason that a good carrier is not going to review an incident or a circumstance, regardless of how minor or major you think it is. You should let them determine that. And I know that's I'm trying to preach to the choir, I guess, but that's my message here as we close out this.
All right, so you're not quite done yet, because
Sure.
Andy Priestman wants more Zach in his life.
Andy,
So
my man, where are you?
And believe me, he's out there.
Where
He's
are
lurking in
you,
the
my
bushes
man?
somewhere. So it's he writes a question, and then I have one more that I want to follow up with because I want to get you to share some insight that you provided earlier to us. But Andy's question is that he says he hears a lot of agents who say they just write their own policy. So
Oh,
agents what are your message for agents out there who say, "Oh, I write my own policy"?
I mean, I think Andy, that comes full circle to what we've talked about for the last hour and 15 minutes. That, I do believe there is a specialty involved in this. And look, I do this for a living. I'd like to think I know something about this, but I use other professionals that I trust to write my own E&O coverage because I trust their opinion. I trust what they're doing. I trust the product they can bring to the table. So again, I think this kind of goes in what I was talking about when you're trying to adjust your own claim. I think writing your own policy is kind of the same way. And, you don't want to outsmart yourself. I believe in the fact, Adam and Nick, that there are smarter people in this world than me. And so, I do have some faith that there are the right people out there to do, right by you and put you with the right coverage. So, Andy, I highly recommend against writing your own policy unless you've got some background that's going to give you the ability, to know when to report claims and to know what goes into a policy and, is your agency accurately covered? Look, I run a very small agency. Andy, you run a much larger agency. I can't imagine all the risk that goes in with all the employees you have. So I know I would want to sleep better at night knowing that not only do I have a good policy in place, I've got an agent that knows how to place that policy properly. So I'm comfortable in saying that, the people I use are good. The people, Nick, you use are the same, and I think they're good. And so, that's my thought. I strongly urge against it. Obviously, everybody's got their own view, but I urge against it.
I want to bring up something because I feel like it could be a good ray of light. And Andy wants everybody to know he also uses US E&O. So we have
Excellent.
three nods to the IAOA sponsor, US E&O.
I have no problem deferring. Yep.
Does this count as their webinar? The question I have, the last question I brought, it was really from a great question Nick gave us kind of before we got on here. And it maybe offers kind of a ray of light to people who are probably, some of whom are probably pretty scared by what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that people are too scared of E&O risk in kind of getting out and growing their business in new directions or trying new niche markets or trying new silos? Do you think that people are too afraid of the effect or that their E&O is not going to cover them as they try and grow their business and go into new practice areas or attempt to grow their business by finding new marketplaces? And I'm not just saying to sell E&O, I'm talking about just for them to move from just being a straight personal lines to a commercial line. Are they too afraid of their E&O exposure in your experience as they make those transitions?
See, and that's a good segue back to what we talked about having the right E&O carrier, working with you. I think if you are already of the mentality that I don't want to report this incident because it's going to raise my deductible or it's going to increase my premium, then you are less likely, Adam, to go out and do like you said, find a new niche for your agency, hire a new producer, and do those kind of things to make your business better. But if you feel comfortable that that insurance is there to help you, it's your friend when you need it, I think you're willing to take the risk in a greater sense. You're willing to take that risk because you know that you're going to do everything you can to, protect yourself and watch your back. But at the same time, it's there when you need it. So at the end of the day, you go out, you hire a new producer, you sell a new lines of coverage, whatever you're doing to, monetarily make you and your agency better. I think you should. I think in the back of your mind, you should have that comfort level. I found that to be the biggest distinction, that people that are, concerned about filing claims with their E&O carrier are going to end up risking less. And so I'm trying to preach here that I'm not saying you should risk, do what you feel comfortable with. That's my advice. Do whatever makes you feel comfortable. But I can't live on eggshells. And so, when I want to go out and learn to sell a new insurance, I'm going to go do and investigate and educate myself. And at the end of the day, I'm just going to go do it. And, I live with those consequences as they come. But I'm not going to be scared to do that because of that, the E&O aspect of it.
And that's why you have the E&O, right? And
that's why it's there.
One of the things you're stressing is this is a partnership. And you just need to do the legwork to find out that it's a partner in the growth of your business. Absolutely. It's you should treat E&O. You should treat your E&O insurance like any other carrier partner you have when you're selling business. You want them as an ally, and the best way they can be your ally is if you use them properly, like you would anything else in business. So the moral of the story is make sure that, I can't stress this enough, premium should not be your first concern when you're purchasing your own E&O policy. If it is, then you're probably going to be, in trouble, because that, the old adage, what you pay for is what you get. I mean, it can be true. So, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap this up, Taylor, because I think, Zach, because I think that gives us all a real kind of good way to look at it, not only as salespeople of it, but also as people who are governed by it to some extent. So I really appreciate you sharing your time. Nick, any last things you want to kick in?
No, again, just echoing. I mean, I know this made Adam super excited for a month.
You have no idea. I mean,
dude, he's been all over me. Adam's been all over me, man. He's been excited. So am I. Great.
I nerded out on this, getting ready for this today. I swear, I was like, oh, can't wait to drop all the Hammer Claws jokes. I was even gonna wear my MC Hammer pants and
man, I wanted to see that.
It's a super important topic that not very many people are educated or educated well enough on. I think it's very evident over the years of conversation. So thank you so much for providing insight, sharing what you do and how you do it, and what we need to be cognizant of as we try to maybe step up our own games. And so I just want to say thank you for taking the time. I know we had some viewers on, had some questions, so I know they probably they stayed with us the whole time, so they must have enjoyed it as well.
Great.
So appreciate it.
Well, I hope, thank you guys very much. And I hope I provided just a little bit of insight and maybe a little bit of perspective for you and your agency. And, that's my hope. At the end of the day, I can only offer my opinion, but I will say that, for anyone in IAOA that has questions or wants to talk or needs advice, I'm always open. My email, my phone is always available to any fellow agent or agency that needs advice. I'm glad to help, and I really appreciate it. It was good being here and good talking with you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Zach.
Thanks, Zach. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.